I want to talk to you tonight about a weapons system that was unveiled in Tehran 6 days ago, on April 27, 2026, that has fundamentally changed the military calculus in the Middle East and sent NATO defense planners into emergency sessions trying to understand the implications. The system was not a nuclear weapon, it was not a hypersonic missile, though Iran has those too. What Iran revealed was a counter-drone swarm system called Mehrab, and if you think that sounds unimpressive compared to the weapon systems that dominate headlines, you are making the same mistake that Western military analysts made when they first saw the footage. This system, if it works as demonstrated, represents a solution to one of the most pressing problems in modern warfare, and the fact that Iran developed it before the United States or NATO did should be a wake-up call about the changing nature of military innovation. I am looking at technical specifications published by Iran's defense ministry and analyzed by multiple independent defense research institutes, including the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London and the RAND Corporation in Washington. What these analyses collectively confirm is that Mehrab is a mobile, integrated air defense platform specifically designed to detect, track, and neutralize drone swarms using a combination of electronic warfare, directed radio frequency weapons, and kinetic interceptors. According to Iranian officials quoted by Press TV and Tasnim News, the system was tested successfully against simulated swarms of up to 50 drones operating in coordinated attack patterns, achieving neutralization rates exceeding 90%. In the next 21 minutes, I am going to walk you through exactly what this system does, why it represents a strategic problem for NATO and the United States, and why the underlying issue is not the technology itself, but what it reveals about the direction of modern warfare and who is prepared for it. This is Daily Brief. Subscribe now if you have not already, because what we are about to cover involves technical details that mainstream coverage is oversimplifying or missing entirely, and the strategic implications extend far beyond Iran's borders. Let's start with why drone swarms are a problem that urgently needs solving, because understanding the threat is necessary to understand why this defensive system matters. Over the past 5 years, drones have evolved from niche reconnaissance tools and targeted strike platforms into the dominant tactical weapon system in modern conflicts. We saw this in the Nagorno-Karabakh War in 2020, where Azerbaijani drones devastated Armenian armored forces. We saw it in Ukraine starting in 2020, where both sides used drones for everything from artillery spotting to kamikaze strikes on tanks and logistics hubs. And we have seen it in the Red Sea and Persian Gulf, where Houthi forces in Yemen use drones and cruise missiles to attack commercial shipping and military targets. The next evolution of the drone threat is swarms. Instead of a single drone conducting a mission, imagine 20, 50, or 100 drones operating in coordination, communicating with each other, adjusting tactics in real time based on sensor data, and overwhelming defenses through sheer numbers. According to research published by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, drone swarm technology is advancing rapidly. China has demonstrated swarms of over 200 drones operating autonomously in controlled tests. The United States has conducted trials with swarms of 50 to 100 drones launched from ships and aircraft. The technology is no longer experimental, it is entering operational deployment. The problem for defenders is mathematical. Traditional air defense systems like Patriot missiles or naval close-in weapon systems are designed to engage high-value targets like aircraft or cruise missiles. A Patriot interceptor costs approximately $3 to $4 million per shot. A kamikaze drone costs perhaps $500 to $2,000 to produce. If an adversary launches a 50-drone swarm at a defended target, you cannot afford to fire 50 Patriot missiles. The cost ratio is absurd, and you would deplete your defensive magazine before neutralizing the threat. What is needed is a low-cost, high-volume defensive system that can engage dozens or hundreds of small targets simultaneously without bankrupting the defense budget. Subscribe if you are watching this and realizing that the drone revolution is not about technology glamour, it is about economics and mass production changing the fundamental cost structure of warfare. Now let's talk about what Iran actually built. Announcement number 1, the electronic warfare component that disables drones without firing a shot. And this one matters more than anything else because it represents the most cost-effective layer of defense. According to technical documentation released by Iran's defense ministry and analyzed by experts interviewed by Jane's Defense Weekly, Mehrab includes an electronic warfare module that can detect drone radio frequencies, identify control signals, and jam or spoof those signals to disrupt drone operations. The system reportedly operates across multiple frequency bands, including those commonly used for commercial drone control links like 2, 4 GHz and 5, 8 GHz, as well as military-grade encrypted communication frequencies. The jamming capability is straightforward. The system broadcasts high-power interference on the frequencies used by the drones, breaking the link between the operator and the drone. Without command and control, most drones either return to their launch point automatically, land immediately, or crash. The spoofing capability is more sophisticated. Instead of just jamming the signal, the system mimics control signals and sends false commands to the drones, causing them to abort their mission, change course, or land in areas where they can be recovered and analyzed. What makes this particularly effective against swarms is that electronic warfare scales efficiently. Jamming 10 drones costs roughly the same amount of power and resources as jamming 100 drones, because you are broadcasting interference across entire frequency bands rather than targeting individual units. According to estimates published by the Royal United Services Institute, the cost per engagement for electronic warfare systems is measured in tens of dollars, compared to thousands or millions for kinetic interceptors. The economics are transformative. The limitation of electronic warfare is that it does not work against fully autonomous drones that operate without continuous radio links. If a drone is pre-programmed with a target location and flight path, and it navigates using GPS or visual recognition systems without requiring external commands, jamming the control link is useless. This is why MERAB includes additional layers. Received. That is announcement number 1. Announcement number 2. The directed radio frequency weapon that physically disables electronics. This is the part that represents a significant technical achievement and caused the most concern among NATO analysts reviewing the system. Directed radio frequency weapons, sometimes called high-power microwave weapons, emit concentrated electromagnetic pulses that overload and destroy electronic components in target systems. Unlike jamming, which is temporary and reversible, a radio frequency weapon causes permanent physical damage to circuits, processors, and sensors. According to Iranian officials speaking to defense media outlets, MERAB's radio frequency component can engage targets at ranges up to 3 kilometers, delivering sufficient energy to disable commercial and military-grade drone electronics. The physics are well understood. Electronic devices have vulnerability thresholds measured in volts per meter. Exceed that threshold and components fail catastrophically. The challenge is generating sufficient power, focusing that power into a tight beam, and doing so from a mobile platform that can be deployed in the field, rather than requiring a fixed installation with massive power generators. According to analysis by defense technology experts interviewed by Defense News, the fact that Iran claims to have fielded a mobile radio frequency weapon suggests either indigenous development beyond what most Western analysts believed Iran capable of, or technology transfer from Russia or China, both of whom have active directed energy weapons programs. Either interpretation is strategically significant. If Iran developed this indigenously, it indicates a level of technical sophistication that challenges assumptions about technological gaps between Western and non-Western militaries. If the technology was transferred, it indicates that US adversaries are sharing advanced capabilities in ways that accelerate threat development. Stay with me, because this is where the system's integrated design becomes clear and where the defensive concept starts to address the full spectrum of drone threats. Announcement number 3. The kinetic layer for hardened or autonomous drones. This is what handles targets that survive or bypass the electronic warfare and radio frequency components. MEHRB reportedly includes a gun-based close-in weapon system using a 30mm autocannon with a fire rate of approximately 5,000 rounds per minute. According to specifications published by Iranian defense sources, the gun system is radar-guided, capable of tracking multiple targets simultaneously, and optimized for engaging small, fast-moving aerial threats at ranges up to 4 kilometers. The ammunition includes both high-explosive fragmentation rounds and proximity-fused airburst munitions designed to create a lethal cloud of shrapnel that increases the probability of a kill against small, maneuverable targets. The integration is what makes the system effective. Electronic warfare engages first, disabling or disrupting as many drones as possible at low cost. The radio frequency weapon engages next, targeting drones that are hardened against jamming or operating autonomously. The kinetic guns provide the final layer, shooting down any remaining threats that penetrate the first two defensive rings. Each layer reduces the number of threats that the next layer must handle, creating a defense in depth that is both cost-effective and resilient. According to the demonstration footage released by Iran's defense ministry and analyzed frame by multiple defense research groups, the Mihrab system engaged a simulated swarm of 50 drones approaching from multiple directions. The electronic warfare component disabled approximately 30 drones. The radio frequency weapon neutralized another 15. The kinetic guns shot down the remaining 5. The entire engagement lasted approximately 90 seconds from initial detection to final neutralization. If these claims are accurate, and multiple independent analysts have stated that the footage appears consistent with the described capabilities, then Iran has fielded a system that addresses the drone swarm problem more comprehensively than anything currently deployed by NATO. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let's talk about why this is a strategic problem for NATO and the United States, because the issue is not that Iran has one weapons system. The issue is what this reveals about the trajectory of military competition and Western assumptions about technological superiority. For the past 30 years, the United States and NATO have operated under the assumption that they maintain a decisive technological edge over potential adversaries. That edge was supposed to manifest in stealth aircraft that cannot be detected, precision-guided munitions that never miss, networked command and control systems that provide perfect battlefield awareness, and advanced drones that operate with impunity because adversaries lack the sophistication to counter them. The operating assumption was that American and NATO forces could use drones extensively, while adversaries could not effectively defend against them. What Iran's Mihrab system demonstrates is that the defensive counters to drone technology are not exotic or unattainable. They are engineering problems that can be solved with sufficient focus and resources. Electronic warfare is not cutting-edge science. Radio frequency weapons are well-understood physics. Radar-guided autocannons are 1980s technology refined and optimized. None of this requires matching the United States in defense spending or technological base. It requires identifying the specific threat, dedicating resources to solving it, and iterating through development until you have a working system. And here is the uncomfortable question for Western defense establishments. If Iran can do this, what about Russia? What about China? If a country under comprehensive sanctions with a defense budget, a fraction of the Pentagon's, can field an effective counter-drone system, what happens when peer competitors with larger budgets and more advanced industrial bases focus on the same problem? The answer is that the drone swarms that NATO is planning to use in future conflicts may be far less effective than current planning assumes, because adversaries will have deployed defenses that neutralize them. Think about the implications for American military strategy. The United States has invested heavily in unmanned systems. The Air Force is developing loyal wingman drones to support manned fighters. The Navy is building unmanned surface vessels and underwater drones. The Army is fielding reconnaissance and strike drones at every echelon from platoon to division. All of this assumes that drones operate in a relatively permissive electromagnetic environment where they can communicate, navigate, and execute missions without being systematically disabled or destroyed by integrated defensive systems. If that assumption is wrong, if adversaries can deploy Mihrab-type systems at scale, then the entire operational concept needs to be reassessed. You cannot rely on drone swarms if those swarms are going to be neutralized before they reach their targets. You cannot depend on unmanned systems if the electronic warfare environment makes them uncontrollable. And you cannot assume technological superiority if your adversaries are solving the same problems you are, sometimes faster and more cost-effectively. If you work in defense planning, if you are a policymaker who allocates budgets based on assumptions about future threats, what Iran just demonstrated should force a fundamental reassessment. The question is not whether Mihrab is the perfect system or whether Iranian claims are slightly exaggerated. The question is whether Western militaries are prepared for a battlefield where adversaries can neutralize drones systematically, and the honest answer right now is no. Let me give you a historical parallel, because this pattern of defenders adapting to negate offensive innovations has repeated throughout military history, and the lesson is always the same. World War I, the tank. When tanks were first introduced by the British in 1916 at the Battle of the Somme, they were revolutionary. Armoured vehicles that could cross trenches, withstand machine gun fire, and break through defensive lines represented a technological leap that seemed unstoppable. The initial German response was shock and disorganization, but within 18 months, the Germans had developed anti-tank rifles, direct-fire artillery tactics, and defensive doctrines specifically designed to counter tanks. By 1918, tanks were still useful, but they were no longer the war-winning superweapon they appeared to be initially, because defenses had adapted. The parallel is exact. Drones are the new disruptive technology that appeared unstoppable when they first demonstrated their effectiveness. But just like every previous military innovation, defenses are adapting, and systems like MERAB represent that adaptation. The cycle continues. Offensive develops a new capability. Defense adapts and neutralizes it. Offense evolves to overcome the defenses, and the competition continues. The question for NATO is whether they are staying ahead of that cycle or falling behind. So where does this leave us? Let me give you 3 paths forward because NATO and the United States have to decide how to respond to this development. Path 1. Accelerate counter drone development and maintain the offensive edge. This is the arms race path. Western militaries invest heavily in drones that are hardened against electronic warfare, that operate with full autonomy and do not require radio links, that use artificial intelligence to adapt to defensive systems in real time, and that are cheap enough to produce in swarms large enough to overwhelm even the most sophisticated defenses. This path is technically plausible and maintains the initiative, but it requires significant investment and accepts that the offensive-defensive competition will continue indefinitely with no permanent advantage. Path 2. Shift strategic emphasis toward other capabilities and reduce reliance on drones. This is the diversification path. Recognizing that drones are becoming increasingly vulnerable to integrated defenses, NATO reduces dependency on unmanned systems and reinvests in capabilities that are harder to counter: hypersonic weapons, cyber operations, special operations forces, manned aircraft with advanced stealth and electronic warfare suites, and space-based systems. This path hedges risk and avoids overcommitment to a single technology that may be countered, but it requires admitting that assumptions about drone dominance were premature. Path 3. Seek arms control frameworks that limit both offensive drone capabilities and defensive counter-drone systems. This is the stability path. The United States, NATO, Russia, China, and regional powers negotiate agreements that constrain drone proliferation and counter-drone defenses to prevent destabilizing arms races and reduce the risk of conflicts escalating due to miscalculations involving autonomous systems. This path is politically idealistic and faces significant verification challenges, but it recognizes that unrestricted competition in drone warfare benefits no one and increases risks for everyone. I think we are heading toward an uncomfortable version of Path 1, where Western militaries spend enormous sums trying to maintain an offensive edge that becomes increasingly expensive and uncertain, while adversaries continue to develop cost-effective defenses that erode that edge. The smarter approach would be a combination of Path 1 and Path 2, investing in next-generation drones while simultaneously diversifying capabilities, but defense bureaucracies are slow to adapt and often overcommit to technologies that worked in the past rather than anticipating what will work in the future. Here are the questions I want you to take away. First, if drones can be systematically countered by integrated defenses, how does that change the future battlefield and what capabilities become more valuable? Second, is the Western assumption of technological superiority still valid when adversaries are developing effective solutions to the same problems, sometimes faster and cheaper? Third, should military strategy be based on maintaining permanent offensive advantages, or should it accept that adversaries will adapt and plan for competitive equilibriums? Tell me in the comments what you think NATO should prioritize in response to systems like MERAB. Tell me if you think the drone revolution is overhyped, or if countermeasures are temporary setbacks. We will keep tracking every development in drone warfare, counter-drone technologies, and the broader evolution of military capabilities. That is what Daily Brief does every single day. Subscribe now. Share this analysis with everyone who needs to understand why weapon systems that do not make dramatic headlines can still reshape strategic balances. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update, and we will see you in the next analysis.